This is where the rabid insanity of modern movement conspiracism becomes as dangerous as it is. And these hearings are pulling open, bloody and raw, the most abraded exposure of this psychotically, cynically self-righteous delusion that we'll get to see before the end. Between November 2020 and January 2021, a faction of far-right authoritarians planned how they were going to recruit like-minded Republicans into helping them overturn the results of the election. We were just reminded that the former president used the Justice Department to intimidate states he lost into overturning the election for him, and the contingencies went all the way to declaring martial law. Reality saw a mob storm the Capitol building on January 6th. And right now, Republicans are passing laws in state legislatures and winning local seats that will make it easier for them to plunge our elections into chaos. All of it, from the former administration's delusional schemes to wannabe militia soldiers ready to capture and kill, is what you might call a secret plot between powerful people or organizations to achieve a sinister goal.
A multi-step conspiracy.
A sprawling, multi-step conspiracy.
A real one that actually happened. And social psychologists would say that those who are most paranoid about such a plot existing are the people who we should most expect to carry one out themselves. You can't beat Karen Douglas. She's been researching this kind of thing for over a decade, long before we knew that paranoid extremism would one day be a hallway away from ending democracy. And she's a core member of my crew. And that means I like to skim her bibliography to see what kind of interesting things I can find, which found me this. And this is all about projection. Projection is when you attribute your own beliefs and feelings and wants to other people. Really, it's a way to say that your flaws aren't that bad, or they're not even flaws, so nobody should judge you for them. And by using that understanding of projection, we can fit it into Douglas's research and start to understand how dangerously delusional the people behind the attempted coup really are. At the University of Kent in 2011, Douglas gathered 189 undergrads who were interested in getting some course credit for participating in a survey. All they had to do was first take a personality quiz that gauged their Machiavellianism, which is an honest-to-God personality trait that psychologists use. Then, they read 17 different conspiratorial beliefs. Granted, they were 2011 beliefs, so adorably quaint by today's standards. Naturally, they were asked to what extent they believed each of the theories. But this question was the interesting one. Would you have done it? I thought, when I was first reading the study, that I could imagine what they would say, at least if the title hadn't spoiled it for me and gotten my attention to begin with. The entire point of the paranoid extremists' beliefs is that they're not beliefs. Not really. Not rationally consistent ones. They're emotional delusions of a cartoonishly evil, fundamentally other enemy that they can use to address their own insecurities. Which, I would think, would give a pretty easy answer to that question. Of course, I wouldn't join these plots, because I'm not a satanic child-eating vampire. But not all of them go so far as to literally demonize their enemies. Certainly not in 2011. And maybe the dynamic of that question changes when the conspiracist feels like they're being asked by a skeptic, who they would need to persuade. Or in other words, who they would need to justify their beliefs to. In that case, the purpose of the answer, I would think, might change. Saying, yes, I would join the plot, might give their theory a little credence to a skeptic in their minds. Wouldn't anyone want to do what the conspirators did, given the circumstances? AKA, cui bono. Any attempt to apply logic like that, though, is probably going to fail. The purpose of conspiracism is not to follow lines of motivation and causality, it's to fulfill an emotional need that only a cartoon enemy can fulfill. The Latin is just set dressing. But that is where Douglas's results got interesting. The more that someone believed in secret plots controlling world events, the more likely they were to say that they would carry out the plots themselves. That's a little wild, isn't it? Not really what I would expect given the conspiracists' need to other their enemies. Maybe it really is about giving themselves some kind of rationalized cover when talking to a skeptic. But this is where the participants' Machiavellianism gives us another dimension of perspective. While the belief in the existence of secret plots correlated with the statement that believers would participate in the plots, certainly much more than non-believers, a Machiavellian personality was a strong indicator for both the willingness to participate in the plots and the belief that the plots exist. In other words, if you are a more manipulative, power-hungry kind of person, you're more likely to project that personality onto the world at large. Now, there is such a thing as secret plots among people with power and wealth. Thankfully, hopefully, none of these little Machiavellians are going to have an opportunity to join a secret sinister plot. But what if they did? This is the question that the hearings run by the Select Committee on the January 6th insurrection, I still can't get over how that's my birthday, is this how people who were born on 9/11 feel, are answering for us right now. What if a bunch of incompetent, petty, spiteful authoritarians believed in a stupidly insane plot to steal an election from them? What would they do? It sounds like there's a lot of key details we're still waiting on that could finally take this all the way to a trial. But the most simple, straightforward answer in the meantime might come from Trump's amateur golf career. Rick Riley's book, Commander-in-Cheat, lays out in extreme detail how Trump is a pathological liar and cheater in the country club golf world. Everyone knows it, and everyone who wants a relationship with him tolerates it. Everyone also hates it, and lots of people call him out on it to his face because he does it right in front of theirs. But whenever he's challenged like this, he justifies himself by saying that he has to cheat because everyone else is cheating. This is naive cynicism, or at least it's how I want to use the term as the psychological refuge of the paranoid extremist. It's an especially malignant type of projection, and it brings us back to The Enigma of Reason. The Enigma of Reason, by Dan Sperber and Hugo Mercier, deconstructs our idea of reasoning as a logical problem-solving mechanism and reconstructs it as a social mechanism. We never just take in an observation, consider it logically, and then come to a conclusion based on good reasoning. Instead, we take in an observation, come to a snap judgment based on our emotions and experiences, our intuitions in other words, and then come up with a post hoc justification to convince others that our conclusions are acceptable, and that they should accept us because of, or in spite of, what we do and believe. That is what good reasoning is, according to the way that our brain is wired. And in this case, it makes for a satisfying deconstruction of Trump's twisted rationalization. Trump observes that he can only win a round of golf by cheating, but his emotional need is to win all the time to feed his ego. His intuitive impulse is to cheat, so he does. And his post hoc justification for cheating is that everyone is cheating, so he shouldn't be judged for, or should even be entitled to, cheating. Likewise, right-wing authoritarians observed that they can no longer win popular support among Americans, but their need is to keep themselves from paying taxes or suffering any consequences for the abusive and hateful things they do by imposing their power over immigrants, minorities, the working class, non-cis heterosexual identities, and women. Their intuitive impulse is to decide that the only way they can achieve these things is by ending democracy. So that's what they tried, and are still trying to do. Their post hoc justification is to say that the people they see as their enemies have already carried out a plot to end democracy, so they're entitled to end it the other way around, on their terms. And they believe it. I really do think they believe it, because it's the kind of thing they want to do themselves, and they need that naive cynicism to believe other people are like them so they can justify themselves. This is where the rabid insanity of modern movement conspiracism becomes as dangerous as it is. They may genuinely believe that everyone wants to dismantle democracy like they do, but they don't feel that they need to justify themselves to the world. They don't feel they need to justify themselves to most Americans. They don't even believe most Americans are American anymore. They believe that the only people who matter, the only lives that matter, are the ones that legitimize their extreme ideology. And not even those lives matter in the end, since the deaths of their supporters on January 6th has done nothing to convince them to stop. The only thing that matters is the ideology of movement conservatism and the power it gives them. The constantly resurrected corpse of nationalist white supremacy and corporate oligarchy. American fascism. And these hearings are pulling open, bloody and raw, the most abraded exposure of this psychotically, cynically self-righteous delusion that we'll get to see before the end. This pattern of reasoning is likely a fractal one on every step of the hierarchy between isolated forum users and leaders in Congress, is someone who observes their imagined identity's waning power. Their emotional need is to be powerful and special, or a fear of losing what they have. Their intuitive impulse is to pitch in on destroying their country's democratic institutions for the sake of their imagined identities. And they justify it by saying that their enemies did it first, because it's what they've wanted to do all along. The thing is that we all believe things like this, as in, we believe in them collectively with others, using post hoc, socially motivated justifications. But even if we can never escape the enigma of reason, we don't need to be held captive by it. We can question it in ourselves to maneuver within it and project it onto others, knowing that it's within all of us, in an attempt to understand and anticipate them. As far as what it anticipates, it does not bode well. Efforts to weaken American democracy have been running at full speed ever since January 6, and the delusional motivations of the people doing this will grow far more dire the more we try to end it with truth. Because once you do join the plot, it doesn't matter how you justify it. And you can't come back from that without a price that's measured by the sum of your ego and collected by the bitter anger of those you betrayed.